Hi. This never really gets easier. I just hit record and let the rest be history. It's 4 a.m. I'm up because I had a matcha ice cream and I underestimated the caffeine. I wanted to make a video to speak about my experience with my family, what it was like for me growing up, and what it's like for me now. It's always, for me, not been easy for me to speak about it. Partially because it is painful, partially also because I just can't find the words. It seems like no matter what I would say, that it would never truly accurately match up to my true experience. And although I don't think I'll get it perfect today, I think I'll try to at least do it better. I don't really know where to begin. My family, I think I should start by saying they are exceptionally strong. They are exceptionally gifted. On my mother's side, they grew up in the rural areas as basically farming peasants in the northeast of China, near North Korea. They had a very hard life. Winters were super harsh. They labored very hard. On my dad's side, he was from even farther up north near Russia in China. He lived more so in the city. But same thing. Winters were harsh. And as far as I understand, food was not always easy to come by. In China, there is a common greeting where you would ask someone, 你吃过吗? Which basically means, have you eaten? And the idea is you weren't always sure whether someone had enough to eat. If they have eaten, you could rest assured that they were doing well, and you could probably see them again. They went to university in a time where only a very small proportion of the population had that opportunity. Nowadays, where I live in Canada, in North America, it's a bit different. It's still well regarded to go to university or college, but it's a lot less necessary than it was before in terms of having the ability to create your own future. Back then, it was, generally speaking, one of the only ways. And my mom and dad got into university the year that they actually reopened after being shut down for maybe a decade, something around that, during the Cultural Revolution. They went to med school. They then eventually ended up immigrating to Canada. They set up shop literally in Victoria, BC. They opened their own traditional Chinese medicine clinic. And it's still open to this day. Now, we are very well off compared to what it was like when they first came here. We own a house in the heart of Vancouver, BC, which has one of the most ridiculous real estate markets in the entire world. My dad is an accomplished lecturer, not at any university, but independently, speaking about his research in traditional Chinese medicine. And my mom does all the renovations, creative output. And my grandma, her physical condition is really not very great, but she still goes out to get groceries. She gardens. And I think I'm encountering this again where when I speak about it, it feels less impactful than what it actually is like. And my younger brother, he's a borderline genius. He is a genius in my eyes. He'll play piano effortlessly. Anything. Improvised. I've cried many times to what he's played. But not only that, he's very gifted in anything that he pursues. He dropped out of university, not even one semester in, to, well, work at this crypto blockchain startup, earning $120K a year. So my family is very strong. They are very capable. But as we know, with great power comes great responsibility. And often this power can be a double-edged sword. And that is definitely what I found in my life. Since being born, I don't really remember my life being too bad until maybe when I was about 5 or 6 years old. The thing is, though, I'm sure that it must have already been bad before that. I just didn't really realize it. One thing about the way that my family has been raised is that they have been raised to be extremely harsh. People from my region of the country, my family's region of the country, being the Northeast, are known to be the most coarse, aggressive, direct, and blunt people in the entire country. And I've actually learned that in some parts of China, today, they don't even hire people from there. This is something I couldn't explain to you unless you were from there or knew someone from there. My grandma came over to help to raise us when my parents were focusing on their career. And I remember every single day my grandmother yelling at us at the top of her lungs to the point where it felt like her voice would split, yelling insults. Frustrations. My entire life was about fitting into this mold, this idea of who I should be in the eyes of my family. My mother had very high hopes, very high visions for me, which in itself is not a negative thing. It is one component of it. It is a positive thing. But when those visions, those expectations come with an emotionally immature approach, an unfaithful approach, then things can get real ugly. What my parents grew up with is this lingering sense of regret. The best way I can describe it is like a poisonous sword, one that's been infected with disease, rust, being sunken into your heart, your stomach, and just left there to fester. A deep internalized shame. One that will make you kick and scream and fight if you don't know what's happening to you, or if you're not willing to face what's happening to you. They grew up feeling like always they did not have the opportunity to do what they wanted to do. They could barely get by. Hatred. Hatred of the self. Hatred of others. My mom told me this story all the time. When she was young, there were a couple few people that she knew that had the opportunity to learn how to play the violin. She would see them practicing, and she would come home to my grandma and say, I want to learn. And my grandma would tell her, don't have the money. Don't have the money for you to learn that. My mom said that she was always so jealous. So, naturally, when raising me, she did so with the perspective of, you have the opportunity to do all the things that I wish I could have done, but I didn't get to do. She put me in piano lessons at the age of 5. Piano was hellish for me. My mom was very pushy about everything. Again, that's how she learned how to get by, is by pushing. And me as a child, all I wanted was for my family to be happy. All I wanted was for peace. All I wanted was harmony. When I felt the deep unrest, the yearning, the longing, the impatience of my mother when she wanted me to learn how to play piano. Well, at first, I didn't want to do it. I told her, I don't feel like doing it. But I agreed eventually because she wanted me to do it so badly. And the way I felt was that, okay, maybe this is good for me. All I know is that my mom really wants me to do it. And if it'll make her happy, I'll do it. That attitude is omnipresent in my journey with my family. I compromise myself so deeply to listen to my family and try to make them happier. Always, my parents would talk about time. Always, they would feel like time is running out. Time is running out. Your youthful years are so precious. And so they would push and push and push and push to squeeze every little ounce out of my time as youth, as a child. If I came home from elementary school and I just wanted to lay on the couch, watch some cartoons, that was not okay. Strictly, maybe 20 minutes. But if after that time I didn't go play piano, then I was having it. Grandma would yell because my grandma was tasked with making sure that we did what we were supposed to do when my parents were off doing their own stuff, working. My mom would come home. It would be incessant, pestering. She would sit me down, sit with me, force me to be there, even when I didn't want to. And I would complain, and I would voice my concerns, and I would voice myself, and it would just turn into fights, into arguments. And these arguments happened every single day. Not only that, outside of piano, I felt like I was being watched closely, deeply, every single moment. If I went to the kitchen, even today, I go to the kitchen. I open the fridge. Immediately, they start talking about what's in the fridge, what do you want to eat. I feel like if I were to pick up a utensil, a spoon, they would mention it. And lately they haven't been saying as much, but I know what they're thinking. Every single movement of mine is watched. And as a child, it was much more intense than it is now. I felt so uncomfortable being observed because always I was observed with a lens that what I was doing was not enough. Not only that, I was blamed. I was given the responsibility of carrying the happiness and the well-being of my entire family at all times. There were times when I didn't want to do what they thought I was supposed to do. and my grandma was watching over me. And they would say, "You are bullying your grandma. You are taking advantage of her." And I was no more than 10 years old. I couldn't understand that, but I believed it. I did fight against it at the same time because inherently it feels wrong, but I didn't know how to separate what my family thought and how I felt. I was also an older brother, the oldest brother. And in my family's culture, they place great emphasis on the oldest son, basically being a secondary parent. All my life, I felt like I shouldered the world. Now, the intensity to which me and my family would fight, I don't think I can really describe it. If it's one thing to help, I mentioned in the beginning that my family is very capable. They have a high pain tolerance. And so the lengths and the extent to which we would go to when we would fight is great. I remember one day my mom and I were in the car and she was driving me somewhere. And mind you, it wasn't just piano. My mom tried to squeeze every bit of value out of my childhood. I was in sports. I was in extracurriculars like tutor. I was studying music theory. Every single day, just about, my days were long because it wasn't just school. Then I had to go here, there, there. I was in karate as well. So one of these days, my mom was driving me in between two places, and we got into an argument again. I got so angry, I started kicking. And my mom began hysterically crying, angrily shouting. You would think that her life was in danger based on the way that she was reacting. And she said, "What if I drive this car into this barrier and kill us both right now?" Still don't know how to really process that. But this leads me to a good point where my mother was extremely emotionally unstable. Extremely. Crazy. She can cry hysterically, just like that. And back then, she would be so angry and just let it all out at me, just like that. And my father, also emotionally is unstable, but in a different way. Most of the times, he was very distant, very uninvolved. One thing I do know, though, is that I felt like he never liked us. Only a few select times he would be happy. But overall, I just know the look in his eyes. That deeply pained the poisoned sword. Sometimes, even though he was largely uninvolved, if things were to escalate between me, my mom, and my grandma to a certain point, and it disturbed his peace to the point where he felt he couldn't handle it, he would come out. And those were always the times that I would fear the most, because he was violent. The crazed look in his eyes, I still remember. I was beat a handful of times. But it wasn't just the physical violence. His being in those times itself was violent. The way that he would speak, violent. Again, you would think that his life was on the line. I cannot describe it with words. I could maybe demonstrate it, but I don't want to. He would grab knives to threaten us. One time, he held a knife to my younger brother's forehead. Why? Because my younger brother at the time was very absent-minded. For good reason. And he would always lose his transit card. And that small little thing became such a huge deal that he felt like he had to force my brother to understand, to respect him. That is one big thing, respect in my family. Any form of individual self-expression is seen as disrespect if it goes against or is different than what they want. But you cannot force a spring to be compressed forever. It's simply unnatural. They would break my technology. When I did finally get a phone when I was in grade 9, I would escape. I would escape through video games. And on several occasions, both my dad and my mom threw my phone and broke it. My life was a war zone. Every day, there were arguments. And I was always living under the fear of things escalating and blowing up. My mother, when I was very young, even told me to not act out of line. Otherwise, my dad will come. She'll tell my dad. And if my dad lets loose and beats us, then he could be taken away to go to jail. And so, I grew up carrying the weight of feeling I had the responsibility of keeping our family together. My mother was also my whole family is extremely emotionally unintelligent, at least emotionally unaware. Any feelings of sadness, anger, whatever, they were just disregarded, swept under the rug. And my mother was religious. I grew up going to church. And to this day, my mom is still delusionally religious. Guiltily religious. She believes that we are all sinful, inherently broken. They always believed that it's impossible for a family to get along and understand each other. That leads me to the conversations that I've been having with my family over the past couple of days. Again, this story is only a very small fraction of what it was really like for me. I am getting better at describing it. And so I'll move forward, even though I'm not completely satisfied. On a side note, that is a large theme in my family of being unsatisfied. A couple days ago, when I came home about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I brought with me a little puppy I just got. And my family, they are, as you could guess, control freaks, clean freaks. My mom put him away in a small bathroom to chew on a bone because it gets over the place. And I was about to leave the house, and I was like, okay, sure. And I come back many hours later, and he's still in there. At this point, I felt upset. I texted my mom, and I told her about how she always tries to control what's around her to make herself feel better. But in doing so, she will suffocate the life out of it. I take my dog out for a walk and come back home. I come to the living room, the dinner table, and I see my mom crying. And I see my dad sitting there with that look in his eyes. I know that look. That is the look that he would have when he is so deeply unsatisfied, hateful. I used to be scared. And I still was. But I sat down right in front of him. We were to talk one way or another, and I was there for it. What my family does is they don't really speak about things until it's time when they feel like they can't hold it in any longer. Always. And so my dad started speaking about how, you're home. We give you all these nice things. Usually, if you're not home, we don't really cook for you, but now we do. We treat you very nicely. You get your own room. You gotta be closed away. You gotta do what you want. We bought you a new computer lately. One of the most key things in my family was always told that I was ungrateful. That I didn't appreciate their efforts. That I didn't see their efforts. When I did. But those efforts don't erase the bullshit that they engage in. He was deeply unsatisfied with me. That is when I stood my ground. I communicated clearly, more clearly than I've communicated ever, to him about how I really feel. How I appreciate him. I appreciate them. I would only want the best for them. They would always say that I'm selfish. They would also always make up assumptions. Over the past while since I've been home, I've been noticeably unhappy. I've been noticeably having struggles. I also happen to be looking for a job at the same time, and they just assumed that, well, I mean, they were saying, we don't have any expectations for you to find a job. Don't feel any pressure. And I said, what the fuck? That's not even, that cannot be farther from why I'm feeling this way. But a big thing in my family is control. You see how my parents are used to controlling the way that I feel, controlling the way that I should feel. Oh, I didn't say so that you should be stressed about this, so don't be stressed. But I did say so that you should feel this way, so you should. He brought up a lot of things. One big thing being, we're going to retire soon. But we want you to take over the business. You think that day that we went over to go have dinner and I talked about the benefits of traditional Chinese medicine, that I was just saying it for nothing? Mind you, we had never spoken about this before. Just blatant accusation out of nowhere. And back then, I wasn't cognitive enough to understand that these things are baseless. So I just believed everything. I felt so worthless, so unseen. I felt like I shouldn't exist. I hated myself for the majority of my life so deeply with a burning passion. Because that is the way that I felt being raised in my family. He also talked about, I have high expectations for you, being the oldest son. I want you to help your mom because she does things regarding computers and you know how to use it, but you don't want to do it. You don't care. I shared with them, the work that I'm doing is the most important thing that I see. To work through things emotionally, to bring insight and clarity to a house full of lies and delusion. The thing about my family is, yes, they are so delusional. It is obvious that they're unhappy all the time. And I would say, you guys are unhappy all the time. I'm learning how to be happy. And I'm learning how to share that with you. But they would say, no, we're not unhappy. What the fuck do you mean you're not happy? Like, obviously, I don't even have anything to say. My mind was so twisted when I grew up because my family was so delusional, and they would never ever ever face themselves. And when I bring to them what I learned, part of which is that my own happiness is up to myself, and that I can choose to give my power over to them, or I can choose to hold it myself. And when I hold it myself, I don't need to be swayed. If they don't get what I'm saying, I used to really care about if they understood what I was saying, and I would try to control them into understanding. That's what my dad said. He would say, like, you're like, so you think that we have to understand. I'm like, no, I don't. You're trying to get us to understand. I'm saying no. But they're so stuck in the way of thinking. They are unwilling to look at something in a new way. When I was a child, whenever I would express myself, it led to bad things. I have a powerful voice. I had to. A powerful being. I didn't know how to wield it back then. It would turn into anger and explosivity, to which my dad would react. We almost got in a fight one time. And to that, I actually grew up with deep anger issues, violence issues. I was always angry, violent, thinking about if I were to walk past someone on the street, I would just have visions of what it would be like if I were to beat them up. Or as a small child, even when I was 6, 7 years old, if I felt too safe, too loving, too warm, if me and my friends were having a good time, it felt really uncomfortable. I would have to close my eyes and imagine myself killing everyone around me in order to feel safe, feel normal again. So, anyways, going back to that day that we had that conversation, I expressed myself openly and clearly. And I learned how to do so from a place of love. And that love shielded me. It allowed me to express myself with full power without attacking. And I did feel that that was very beneficial for me. Still, my parents are so stuck in their own ways, it's crazy. Literally crazy. But obviously, I can't control that. can only do me. But what I can sense is that they know that I've changed. And that evidence of me being different now, handling things in a new way, it is powerful. Love is unconditional. True love is unconditional. But to my dad, especially, and also to my mom, comes with a lot of conditions. Always, they think about what I can do for them. But the thing is, never are they satisfied with that approach. Never. My dad is in a perpetual state of grief. We had a phone conversation a couple of months ago where he said that he is unsatisfied every single day. Obviously, I'm unsatisfied every single day. Always filled with regret. Energy vampires, zombies. And that's why I have to protect my own energy in my own house. Always looking to feed off of me to try to satisfy this itch that can never be satisfied unless you go within. It still does feel difficult for me sometimes to speak to them because of how delusional that they are. They would not call an apple an apple. They would never admit that they feel unhappy, even if it's the most obvious thing of all time. Always changing the topic, deflecting. But if that's how it is, then fine. I'll never stop speaking. I'll disengage when I feel like it's right. But I will make it clear. The truth. The light. Those things are the simplest things. Delusion is complicated. And they would say, what I'm saying is complicated. I make it complicated. I analyze so deeply. I'm okay now. I don't just blindly believe whatever they're saying. I value my own opinion. I value my experience. I put it to the test. And through putting it to the test, I know what's true and what's not. Earlier today also, we had further conversation. I could tell my dad was on the edge. If things went even just a little bit aggressive on my end, he would have snapped. That's the look in his eyes. When he would get violent. And when he did do that, it was with no warning too. He would just suddenly start acting as if I was his worst enemy. That just shows how much of an enemy he is into himself. Earlier today, I gave him this salute. And then I gave him this salute. Why'd I do that? So much built up energy within me. It's a way for me to clearly show my dedication. But when I did that, he was in shock. He was on the edge, teetering, not knowing what he should do, feeling threatened by the power, but also seeing that it wasn't directed aggressively towards him. I stand my ground. I know that if anything were to happen now, I'm more than capable of defending myself, diffusing the situation the best I can. And if it comes to a physical altercation, even if he grabs a knife, it's crazy I have to think about this, but it's a really very real possibility. And even if that happens, I think I'll be able to handle myself. There's so much more I could talk about with my family, but I think that's a good place to end it. This one's a longer one than the last one. And again, if you're here, I thank you so very much. It means the world to me that simply through sharing my experience, this could help someone out. And conversely, when you listen, when you leave a message, when we connect, that helps me out too. This world can be a messed up place. My family was a product of not just themselves, but also what they were born into, what was going on around them. And I understand that. And the only thing that we can do is liberate ourselves, each and every one of us. We can help each other out on our journeys. And I do this for the vision of a better world, one where nonsensical delusion, like what exists in my family, does not need to exist anymore. We can live in peace and harmony. We can live simply, understand simple love, simple joys, simple pleasures, and then reach for the stars. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.